This isn't the RAF's latest secret weapon, but it is a supersonic jet fighter destined for what could be its final mission. The RAF is taking the wraps off some of its mystique, and this Mirage aircraft is one of the first exhibits to be housed in the specially designed Fighter World hangar. It's still early days for what should become a unique attraction for an estimated 40,000 visitors a year. Exhibits span half a century of fighter aircraft and weapons technology, and work is underway on a flying theaterette, which will have a hydraulic floor and wraparound screen to simulate the sensation of flight. It's hoped Fighter World will not only maintain links with the past, but establish understanding of present operations.
That includes high-tech interactive displays, and what we aim to do is to show the public of Australia how their defence dollar is spent, and particularly in the fighter force.
Fighter World will be open to the public on Saturday afternoon, with a few old warbirds such as a Kitty Hawk, Mustang and Spitfire flying in for the occasion. Other visitors at the base today were 6 Royal New Zealand Air Force Skyhawk fighters. They'll be participating in joint exercises in the Tasman Sea between Newcastle and Nowra with the Royal Australian Navy, the Australian and Canadian Air Forces. Air-to-air and air-to-sea combat manoeuvres are planned to ready personnel for any future involvement in the Gulf War. And while it was all handshakes for now, within days these pilots will be acting as foes, recording kills through video camera sites.
"29-year-old Rick Duncan has been flying hang gliders for 18 years. He's won 1 world title, 4 national and 3 state championships. But while he's got the capability to take the history-making second world crown, Rick still has his feet planted on the ground. Since the 1988 world titles in Victoria, Rick's form has slumped. His business concerns and over-enthusiasm have blown his chances. But in Brazil on the 21st of February, he's trying a new tack.
The main thing is at the beginning of the competition is to qualify for the finals first. And I've gone through the mistakes of just recently of trying to beat everybody first day. So I'm going to just take it a bit easy and work my way into it and build up for the finish.
Rick's been testing some new Newcastle-made gliders for the championships. He says when competing against the world's top pilots, reaching heights of 3,000 metres and covering up to 120 kilometres, he needs the best. But beyond the skill and the equipment, will Rick be taking any chances with life and limb to regain the title?
The equipment that I got now is as good as any, or perhaps better. If you got something that's performing better, you don't have to take risks. But if it's performing not quite as good, then you may have to. So we'll just feel that one out, I think.
Rick flies out with the 6-man national team, by jet that is, to Rio tomorrow. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
It was a banner day for lawn bowls as some of Newcastle's finest took to the greens against the English visitors. The 28 men and 16 ladies representing the Old Dart weren't exactly the cream of the crop, but they were all dedicated to their sport.
All of them have made contributions towards the bowling fraternity. I've got several past presidents of the English Bowling Association. I've got presidents of counties, secretaries, treasurers, people that have devoted a lot of time and a lot of their life towards bowls.
The tour has taken the Poms across America and the South Pacific, leaving them in an ideal position to assess the strength of the game in a number of countries.
It's only a little country, but Fiji needs to be watched very, very carefully. They only have 10 clubs there, but they do have some very strong bowlers. But of course, Australia, the national game, Australia's always got to be in there knocking at the door.
But today all efforts were concentrated on defeating the men and women of the Newcastle District Association. It was a case of never underestimate a proud local though, with the Novocastrians emerging convincing winners. It was back to business for the Knights today as they set about stretching the muscles made weary by a hectic recent schedule.
There's a few uncertainties at the moment. They've picked up some bruises from the weekend's game, and there's a couple still lingering on, so we'll settle on the squad probably tomorrow or Thursday. So.
Whatever the final combination, the Knights will go into the game on a definite roll. Sunday's Sevens win was the club's finest moment, and the players will be attacking the Challenge Cup with just as much determination.
Take every competition as seriously as it deserves. There's pretty good riches up there for the sides who perform quite well, and it's a competition, and every time you play a game, your hard-earned reputation goes with you. So.
Major injury worries include Steve Walters and Gary Worth. Both will be given until at least tomorrow afternoon to prove their fitness. Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
Despite the efforts of peace rallies, the Gulf War goes on, so a group of Newcastle women decided more basic action was needed. They believe if women withdraw their nurturing services every Thursday, it could stop more names being added to our war memorials.
Women, by striking in this way, are telling the government and the world that we're not interested in resolving the conflict this way, with a war, violently. And then, men also can start to think about the fact that they instigate wars and that they need to look at other ways of changing things.
Letters are being sent out urging women to join the strike, suggesting they refuse to cook, clean, listen to men's problems or even have sex. And it's purely coincidental that it begins on Valentine's Day.
Well, it's a very mixed response. I get really surprised, actually. I was talking to a man this morning and I think he supports it.
There are 300 sheep farmers in the Merriwa-Cassillis-Coolah area and 600,000 sheep. Growers say the wool's being pulled over their eyes. 7 months ago, they were guaranteed a minimum average price for their fleece of 700 cents per kilogram. Now they face financial disaster.
I would say that we would be looking at a 75% cut in our wool clip.
That's in money terms.
In money terms.
Anthony Martin from the Dalkeith stud will shear 23,000 merino sheep in the next 6 weeks, but it's a financial burden he dreads. According to Mr Martin, local graziers will survive the collapse, but their properties won't. All maintenance and improvement work will stop. Dalkeith will concentrate on beef to soak up its costs.
We'll breed our way up into cattle. We're lucky that we have got cattle to breed our way through. A lot of people in the district don't have cattle.
But the financial burden is not just one for farmers. Businesses in towns will suffer as well. Here in Merriwa, shopkeepers are preparing for a lean year.
All the rouseabouts, shearers and so on that are going to be deprived of income, I can see that it can't do anything but lower our income.
The town of just more than 1,000 people had been riding on a wheat boom and then the sheep's back. Wheat has collapsed and now wool predictions are grim. Signs of decay are setting in. It's estimated some business could fall by another 20%.
It goes further than the local storekeepers, goes down to the local truck drivers who have to cart all these products in. They're going to lose. It goes down to the local soil conservation workers. They're going to lose because there's going to be no work for them.
Locals say it's a battle they can fight. Times have been tough in the bush before.
It's only been in recent years that the importance of this country's wetlands has been realised. Now more and more people appreciate their beauty, and the new stamps both celebrate and promote that growing awareness.
It does reflect a growing interest, and I also think it's a wonderful thing. Australia is one of the driest continents in the world. Its wetlands, like its forests, have been rapidly destroyed, and it's only in recent years that their real value has been recognised, and having everybody in Australia licking one of these things and putting it on an envelope and going and sending it off to friends and relatives in Australia and overseas, I think is a very important thing for the promotion of wetland conservation.
There are 4 in the series, each illustrated with detailed accuracy. The black swan, the Cape Barren goose, the chestnut teal and the black-necked stork are all depicted in their natural environment. To mark the launch, Australia Post made a special plaque presentation to the Shortland Wetland Centre.
At a meeting today, representatives from agencies such as the Smith Family, Red Cross, Salvation Army and City Mission agreed requests for help in recent months have almost doubled, but the needs of these new clients are far greater than a simple bag of clothes and a food parcel.
Usually it's the wife who comes and asks for help, very embarrassed. And there's a hopelessness there, because coming and asking for food this week from a welfare agency or help with electricity isn't going to solve the problem of next month's mortgage, the car payment, the car registration and so on.
According to Sister Carmel Hansen, coordinator of today's crisis meeting, one of the key problems is that many families, while being in dire straits financially, still in the eyes of the government have too much to qualify for assistance.
Social Security isn't set up to help people who are single income earners or who own their own business. I mean, it just looks at assets, and assets doesn't put food on the table.
The meeting made a firm resolution to lobby local politicians for new updated aid packages offering mortgage relief and financial help, not only for businesses but for their employees as well.
Tom grew up in Adamstown. The only time he spent away was serving in 2 world wars. He just turned 18 when the Anzacs stormed Gallipoli. Months later, he was there in the trenches as a machine gunner with the 18th Battalion. When the diggers pulled out, he was one of the last off the beach. It wasn't long before Tom was in the front lines of France. Returning home, he took up the relatively safer occupation of coal mining. He answered the call again for the Second World War as a recruits machine gun instructor at training camps in Bathurst and Cowra. Tom married and raised 3 sons, all of whom served in the Second World War. Back in civilian life, Tom finally retired as a mines deputy at the John Darling Colliery. Friends and relatives attended a lunch where he was presented with an RSL Long Service Certificate by branch members.
The fire swept through undergrowth, throwing out a wall of flames just metres away from houses. Terrified residents watered down their homes, caught by surprise with a sudden wind change.
And all of a sudden it came out of the trees and there was just spot fires everywhere. And then everyone started running to get the hoses.
We've got to stop the fire at this front or we'll be in trouble all day over.
More than 50 hectares of bush and grazing land were burnt out. These cattle were trapped by the fire, rescuers arriving just minutes away from disaster. Tonight, a huge cloud of smoke is hanging over Edgeworth. Firemen are on standby against further outbreaks. Peter Ryan, NBN News. More than 4,000 people were there for a buck-jumping, high-flying, knee-slapping night.
Frosty's a horse, all fired up, and Brad Singleton.
22 cowboys tried out for the saddle bronc, the aim to make the horse buck and to stay on.
If you draw a good horse and ride him good, you win, you know. But the other guys can draw the good ones too and win on.
Burke rider Peter Simmons hung on for the $200 prize money. The Brahman bulls were wild and angry.
Local favourite and his time right to the winner. How about it, ladies and gentlemen? I said that kid can ride bulls.
Gunnedah Scott Mains took first from Corindai cowboy Scott Doyle. There's no doubt about it, this is a special breed of bushy prepared to put life before limb.
Come on, cowboy, hang on. We're going to try and get up first for the line.
Well, what do you reckon, Mike? It's a lot of bull and only 8 seconds of action, but I think I might leave it to the Cowboys. Peter Ryan reporting for SportsCentre Sunday.
If the words Ducati, Moto Guzzi, Galera, Pavilla or Benelli make your blood run hot, then Myuna Bay was the place to be for a gathering of the Italian motorcycle families. Wet weather and greasy roads proved no deterrent to local, Sydney and interstate enthusiasts who'd come for a glimpse of a rare MV Agusta 750 Sports valued at about $50,000, or any one of more than 100 bikes ranging from single to six-cylinder, 50 to 1000cc models. Phil, what's the attraction of owning an Italian bike?
Something different, a lot of class, they've got a charisma all their own, they've got a sound all of their own, real enthusiast bike, real sporting machine rather than a sort of a ride to work type bike. Yeah, a real enthusiast machine mainly, I think.
This 1960 ex-police Moto Guzzi is a typical example of the flair and style built into generations of Italian bikes. Others can prove a little more temperamental. The cathedral was filled to overflowing for the service. The scouting movement is flourishing both here and overseas. Eastern Europe is opening up to the worldwide fellowship, while at home the joining up age has been lowered to 6. Cubs, scouts, guides and brownies, official guests and family members from throughout the Hunter joined in prayer for the health, happiness and safety of other scouts throughout the world, as well as for better international understanding.
Thinking is the power by which we grow and develop. By thinking of our sister guides in all other lands, we are building a network of love and friendship and unity in the world.
Then it was lunch and activities by the foreshore for the Cubs and their families.
The action was red hot and claimed its first victim in Heat 2 when Darryl Scott flipped his car, rolling several times in the main straight. Scott was treated trackside by officials who raced to his aid, and he was later taken to hospital with suspected back injuries. 3 hits later, it was Darryl Cross who also ended up in hospital after he too came to grief in the main straight. The Australian title was really having its ups and downs, and the final was no different. The only female driver in the event, Julie Vine, clipped a wheel and catapulted into the safety fence, which stopped what could have been a disaster for the many spectators only feet away. The championship was then declared with Sydney driver Glenn Dobbin acclaimed the winner, and the good news was that all 3 drivers involved in the pile-ups were released from hospital this morning, suffering only cuts and bruises. The Newcastle 10-pin bowling cup is an institution in the sport, and some of the very best exponents of the game were at Mayfield today to try and win this prestigious trophy. Mark Ramsey bowled a perfect 300 yesterday, but couldn't maintain his form, and he finished 3rd with an average of 212 per game. Just in front of him was Chris Batson, who also had one blistering game of 290, and he finished in second place with a game average of 214. But they couldn't catch Billy Gardner, who was a model of consistency with a game high of 255 and an excellent average of 233. The final day's play in the Newcastle Auto Air Snooker Classic at the Stockton RSL is still in progress, with the final scheduled for 7 o'clock tonight. Alan McIntosh, the tournament's number 1 seed, was in devastating form in his quarter-final against Greg Nyland. Nyland was unlucky not to win the first frame when the black jawed, and McIntosh took the advantage. From there on, the Cohiba player powered away with a brilliant break of 50 to cement his place in the semi-finals. The oldest player in the event, Frank Skidmore, was having his work cut out against Paul Ramage. The 64-year-old was using every trick in the book to stay in touch. The other quarter-final between Tony Vile and Graham Wood was a close tussle, with Vile winning the first frame.
As one of the city's and indeed the country's larger accountancy firms, KPMG Pete Marwick has a large enough clientele to gauge the financial environment of the business sector. And right now in the Hunter, partner Paul Mather admits the picture is grim.
Some of the debts are going bad, people are extending credit beyond what I can usually afford, nobody's buying things, so there's just no cash flow really.
But Mr Mather says what could very well be the final blow for those battlers is the federal government's new company tax instalment scheme. Basically, it's an attempt to see companies pay their tax as individuals do, on a sort of pay-as-you-earn basis. But to bring companies into line with that system, they'll have to pay 2 years' tax within 7 months.
Essentially, they paid 100% of their tax in December last, and now 7 months later they've got another 85% to pay. A number of the smaller businesses will be in serious financial trouble and could indeed finish up going into bankruptcy or liquidation.
In response to that threat, KPMG Pete Marwick has presented an alternative arrangement to the government, in short, asking that businesses be allowed to defer payments for several months in each case to offer them more badly needed breathing space. What's the reaction been to the plan so far?
Generally favourable among the taxpayers that we've spoken to. The government has received our submission and they are considering it at the moment.
What do you think its chances are?
I rate it as very good.
It was back in December last year when the Commonwealth Bank withdrew its support for Carrington slipways. The shipyard was burdened with million-dollar debts and no new work on its books. Last week, a former owner of Alco Steel announced he was seeking partners in an attempt to buy the assets of the shipyard and save the skilled workforce. Manuel Alves believes he can pick up the yard and its equipment for $6 million and get the business up and running with working capital of around $3 million. Mr Alves is to invest $1 million himself. Subcontractors say they can raise $1 million, but that still leaves him short. Building company DF McCloy has expressed an interest in joining the group and may bring other interested investors with it. The group also had discussions yesterday with the Australian Industry Development Corporation, which is considering a 30% stake. The Alves syndicate has had little joy with big public companies and financiers. However, Senator John Button told a union delegation that his department would examine the option of putting together a government-backed group of major industrial companies to save the yard. His office is remaining tight-lipped over the makeup of that second consortium. Meanwhile, work is progressing at Tomago on the ANL ship Searo Tamar. Specialist subcontractors will be shed from tomorrow. The first retrenchments will come in March. By the time the ship is launched in April, the current workforce of 300 is expected to be halved. John Church, NBN News.